Hello, so I want to do a field story and I want to talk about this field here I'm in now called Pillbox, which I'll explain why it's called Pillbox in a minute. You'll see behind me there's quite a few sheep. There's about 200 sheep in this field. Now I'm not a shepherd, they're not my sheep. I think there's a point behind that because livestock, particularly sheep, are a common way for new entrants to get into farming. So the shepherd here for these sheep is called Dan. I had a chat with Dan. He's got about 2,000 sheep now. He started off with a flock of about 200, like about what we've got in this field, and he's building up and kind of found his way into farming through sheep. And that's very common with livestock, with small herds of cattle or flocks of sheep for people to find in. So people need to keep that in mind when we say we need new entrants into farming. The most common way probably is with people having a flock of sheep. This field is actually one of the grazing pastures for the dairy. The cows have been in a few weeks now. With all this wet weather, they would really trample this ground and make quite a mess, but sheep are a lot lighter. They're actually much better grazers as well. So in the same way, we as people don't want to have food waste, and we're trying to sort out food waste. I don't want grass waste. And when we get to the end of the season, there's parts of the field and of the sward that the cows don't bother eating and don't want to eat, and so the sheep come in and do a tremendous job of tidying up the lays, trimming them down. It's a much better, more environmentally friendly way of doing it than coming out with a tractor and a topper. And so the shepherd and the sheep are doing an environmental service for me to get these lays into good order, and then in the spring they'll grow away much better as a result. Also say about this field, it's quite a steep field. You can't see, it's got quite an aspect on it. If I swoop round, it's divided into several paddocks. We now graze the cattle in paddocks, and that helps to graze more efficiently. It's good soil type here. Now this has grown wheat in the past. It's actually been a lay now for probably 10 years. At the very bottom of the field, right down the bottom there, in those trees, is the Avon Canal. So I'd also say to those who claim we need to have less livestock and that ruminants are all bad news, you're quite right. I could plough this field back up. I'd have to get permission because it's classed as a permanent pasture. But I expect if I asked DEFRA pretty please, they would come through and allow me to plough it up. Is that a good idea? It's very steep. It points down towards the canal. I don't particularly want to see my soil washing down into the canal. It's not a good idea. This grass lay has very few inputs. It does have some fertiliser because we're a conventional farm, so we do apply some amounts of nitrogen fertiliser over the season, but basically no actives, although I could. There's no need to spray this field. The topper does any of the weed control we need to do in the summer. If we have a few thistles, we come out with a spade and we dig them up. So I try and now avoid using any chemical actives on this field. Yes, I could plough it up, grow vegetables, do other things with it, but I'm not sure it would be good for the field. I'm not sure it would be good for my soil, which is actually well protected and sequestering carbon nicely on this field. The final thing to say was, why is the field called Pillbox? And it's in the distance behind. If I turn around the other way, you should be able to see now in the background, there we are, behind my head, there's a kind of concrete style box, and that's quite a bit of history behind that. So back in the Second World War, it was decided or thought quite likely that Hitler would land troops and try and invade the UK, and they thought he would use the canals as an arterial route for bringing in supplies. So all along this Avon Canal, those objects we call the pillboxes, and that one's now protected, so we couldn't take it out even if we wanted to, but it is built very, very strong. So even after all these years, what is it, 50 years plus, it would take some taking out. I'd be there with a jackhammer for quite some time, so that's not an option. So actually recently, back in the spring, we converted that pillbox to be a bat sanctuary. Quite a few of them have been done with our group, our Pewsey Downs Farmers Group, and they're working well. This one's only been done since the spring, so we did survey it earlier in the year. No bats in there as yet, but it takes a few years to them to get accustomed to it and to use it. But we'll keep monitoring it, and we've also planted a hedge that feeds up to it now, and as that develops, that will also draw the bats in. For the future, I intend to keep it as a grass lay, as a grazing lay for the dairy herd. I'm looking to see whether we can get more herbs into it to have more of a herbal lay. I'm also keen to kind of maximise the amount of clover we have in it, which would help to reduce the fertiliser requirement. But I personally believe that this field is best left as a lay. Very glad to have these sheep here doing a great job of tidying it up with their light feet. So hopefully we'll have a lot of grass out here next summer for the cows. So that was my first field story, the field Pillbox.